There are certain games that possess a legacy so divine that discussing them in detail can almost feel redundant nowadays. The PS2 era was filled with such gems, especially in various action game subgenres, and two of the greatest examples in that regard were released in the span of roughly 1 month from one another. The first of those games was Resident Evil 4, which redefined its IP's survival horror identity and started a new RE renaissance. The second game I alluded to a second ago was none other than Devil May Cry 3, a game so iconic with its style and substance that only its sequels could have a chance of ever surpassing it. Now, here's the issue. What can you say about these games that hasn't already been said thousands of times before? On the surface, DMC3 in particular is essentially the coolest game you could imagine in the 2000s, allowing you to hunt demons with filthy industrial rock tracks, one-liners all over the place, brilliant acrobatics, and weapons that cover any idea you could have for fun gameplay. If not in playable form, then at the very least, through its cinematics, which would then let a future game render them to be truly playable. No matter how linguistically skilled you may be, no amount of praise could truly paint DMC3 in the light it deserves. And given that a colossal amount of coverage this entry got, mostly reiterated on what made this game so legendary 20 years ago, we will therefore approach this video in a slightly different way. Since the gaming industry is so adamant on remake culture lately, with even the aforementioned RE4 receiving that treatment, I thought it would be better to express what makes Devil May Cry 3 a truly timeless game even in 2025, without outright explaining every mechanic and story beat for you in a 7-hour video. I feel that the best place to start this brief presentation would be with the concept that is truly synonymous with DMC as a whole: style. Having a game with in-depth mechanics is obviously a plus, because it lets your audience experiment and develop their own playstyle and way of expression. But something being complex doesn't mean it will appeal to the greater public. Which begs the question, is it more important to have something truly complex in a game, or having something that first and foremost looks cool? Well, DMC is an example of these two choices being in perpetual unison. The execution required to master these games and truly look stylish is more than most can handle, hence why many will default to things like stinger spam during their first dance with the series. But even when you're spamming, the animations look glorious, the sound design is fantastic, and even if you feel like you didn't play the game as it may have been intended, Dante's cutscene antics will alleviate that doubt for a while, likely motivating you to genuinely become more stylish over time. While even the games preceding DMC3 had a style meter and mission ranking, incentivizing the pursuit of perfection or stylishness, I'd argue that DMC3 was the first game ever to truly define what being stylish meant. In the first game, keeping up a combo for an extended period of time was enough to get a high rank in a combo, and being fast in your playthrough would frequently lead to a higher mission ranking. This means you were being efficient, but efficiency alone doesn't fully equate to style. DMC2 attempted to better define the essence of stylish gameplay with explicitly laid out parameters, but due to its lessened challenge and poorly thought out level structure, getting a high rank in the game didn't make you feel cool either, even if the rankings would say otherwise. The point of the system shouldn't be to give you a dopamine rush over a high score of sorts. Instead, it should teach you what it means to be stylish, and bring you closer to the nature of Dante's antics in the games. So, how does DMC3 achieve this? Well, it gives you a very clear list of criteria within a game fully built around the required skill sets. The levels are short and linear, with each area having very specific enemy placements with easily identifiable behavior, even from a mere gaze at their designs. The moment you enter a room, you know what you have to do. You need to be fast, thorough, diverse in your combos, and depend on your own execution, rather than spamming various consumables. And even then, you don't have to be flawless to truly S-rank a mission, or in turn, be considered stylish. Even a game as seemingly unforgiving as DMC3 allows you to have 1 B rank or 2 A ranks amidst your other accomplishments while still granting you an S for your effort. Your combos can follow a similar logic, as there are varying degrees of S-rank combat, ranging from single S to triple S combos. So between these parameters, the game's selective lenience and the hard limit of only having a select number of weapons at your disposal within a mission run, DMC3 makes for the perfect crash course on what being stylish is, making your normal difficulty run a tutorial to keep getting even better in the subsequent difficulties. This succinctness of design, however, isn't entirely present in DMC4 and 5, as the former's orb requirement ruins the idea of fast stylish gameplay by having you roam the interconnected levels to break as many environmentals as possible, even allowing you to take up to an hour in a single mission to do so. DMC5, on the other hand, basically incentivizes skipping over a number of enemy encounters, due to its style ranking functioning on a basis of the collective average, which means one fight with a singular lesser enemy could ruin your otherwise flawless execution. Even in a franchise that is synonymous with style, there are degrees to its stylishness, and despite it being 20 years old, DMC3 and the level of expression it grants is orders of magnitude ahead of most other game genres, and by extension, the games that inhabit them. While the character action genre specifically is filled with entries following in DMC3's footsteps, which in turn led to some genuine gems like Bayonetta, MGR Revengeance, God Hand, and countless others, the highest highs of the genre have always belonged to Devil May Cry, either due to the third game redefining the genre, or its successors further experimenting off its flawless basis. This is even apparent from a mere glance at the game's star cast, which people are even more familiar with than the stylish gameplay. Now, on the surface, 3's depiction of Dante, Virgil, Lady, and the bosses of Temenigru feels very basic and video gamey. We have a chaotic teen, a broody intellectual, a beautiful badass, and a collection of demons that are there to seemingly serve as a backdrop for their antics. But in reality, every narrative element introduced in this entry holds immeasurable weight, particularly due to their respective essences, in many ways, being a deconstruction of the archetypes they seem to embody. Dante, for example, may be a wacky pizza lover in the beginning, but the more time you spend with him, the more apparent does it become that his cockiness, sarcasm, and showy nature are all coping mechanisms for him dealing with feelings of fear, resentment, and abandonment. If you don't believe this reading of his character, it should be noted that even Hideki Kamiya, the director of the very first game, labeled Dante's use of quips as a way of dismantling fear while fighting hordes of demonic entities, and Hideaki Itsuno, the director of the series since DMC2, took the basis of his world and the characters to heart, before fully taking the reins in DMC3. Apparently, he even asked for Kamiya's blessing before envisioning this game as a prequel to the series, and that amount of care and understanding can be felt in every pixel of the game. For example, Virgil, an individual technically introduced as a brainwashed, though still incredibly skilled swordsman in the first game, is presented as less of a dark mirror to his brother in 3, and more of a diverging of paths, as Nello Angelo would be in the end. Virgil is calm, collected, driven beyond what words could describe, but despite his threatening demeanor, is an utterly broken individual. This is not a villain who seeks power for the hell of it. It's someone who has emotional scars so deep that the feelings of hopelessness stemming from the loss of his parents drove him to find a way to never feel it again. It motivated him to become so powerful he would never be hopeless again, and that road almost led him to erase the last of his bloodline by his own hand. Evidently, that's not how their story would end, and both his and Dante's evolution throughout Devil May Cry 3 is proof of the substance this game hides under its flashiness, humor, and the excitement it instilled in the general public once it was unleashed in 2005. Much like its combat, the story of this game offers infinitely more than what you originally thought, though most people likely won't bother to seek out that value. For many, the surface look at DMC3's qualities might be more than enough to count it as one of the gaming greats, but for me, it's what's beneath that surface that truly cemented it as one. I may still quote the dozens of one-liners like jackpot or foolishness on a daily basis, but a game can't live off of quotability alone, not even a game this memorable. As you may know, character action games are usually quite short, and given how you're expected to play through them numerous times to fully see the extent of their potential, this means that you will either hear the same lines dozens of times over, or that you'll outright skip cutscenes upon replays. So, if that's the case, how come DMC3's legacy has only gotten greater with time? Well, part of that comes from the evolution of meme culture, circling back to appreciating PS2 era humor. So while the core fanbase has always adored the dialogue here, even the grander gaming community would join in due to everything in DMC being so bloody memeable. The other part of the game's longevity is due to something most people have, ironically, taken for granted as of late, which would be replayability. Nowadays, most people will play the brunt of a new game, maybe finish it if they really enjoyed the build-up, and then move on to the next shiny thing. Only a small fraction of players will actually do multiple replays, especially if they're not required for the associated Platinum trophy. This is why there are fewer developers these days that think about the added substance their creation could have for a player, and usually have their New Game Plus runs on higher difficulties equate to slightly altered damage outputs and maybe a new costume or two. So, how does DMC3 circumvent these pitfalls even 20 years later? Well, to start off, the core of the series has always had a striking resemblance to the logic of arcade games. Again, something Hideki Kamiya was very vocal and passionate about through the years. The idea with DMC1 was to, among other things, create something short and replayable. Something where the essence of the experience may be simple on a mechanical level, but offered you the potential to keep improving, to keep surpassing your personal best, and keep exploring the game's mechanics for countless hours at a time. The same applies to DMC3 on a multitude of levels. If the rankings at the end of your missions weren't indicative enough, playing the game stylishly meant that you were rewarded with more red orbs, which would mean you could purchase more moves for all your weapons and play even more stylishly now that you had new skills at your disposal, leading the cycle to repeat itself until you unlocked everything. And this is far from the only design choice to interest you in spending more time with the game. DMC3 is one of the greatest examples of designing separate difficulty settings in a genuinely meaningful manner, to where it feels like every individual setting grants you a significantly different gameplay experience even when you've unlocked every single move for every weapon. When moving on from normal difficulty to hard, not only will the enemies do more damage and you do less, but the enemy placements within a given mission will be different as well. A higher level enemy that would normally be introduced in the second half of the game on normal difficulty could now appear in the first half of the game on hard, and the mission that would originally introduce them could now present 3 or 4 of those enemies for you to fight. The enemies also have faster animations, better react to your movements, and start utilizing moves you've never seen on your normal playthrough. This core logic would be expanded upon as you explored the higher difficulty settings as well, but it wouldn't stop there. Dante Must Die, for example, introduces your signature Devil Trigger mechanic as something that the enemies can now use as well, provided you don't dismantle an encounter in time, or if you take too long on one enemy while the others get their health multiplied in the process. These premises may have been present in the games that preceded DMC3, but again, by nature of the game being so flawlessly designed at its core, the combat feeling better than ever, and this game introducing a proper mission select on top of that, this is easily the game where the idea of tackling DMD missions and hunting for the rest ranks feels the most intuitive that it ever has. The same could apply to every individual setting, as even easy difficulty challenges you in a different way than the others, now that the enemies die too quickly for you to style on them as before, and the end result is increased replayability, where every mission of every difficulty is its own distinct playground. Now, you might argue that DMC4 and 5 followed the same principle, and included even more difficulty settings like LDK and Hell in Hell, which is true. So how does DMC3 still hold its own by comparison? Not even counting the unique weapons, cause that could prolong the video to the 1 hour mark, one of 3's most unique qualities are the unlockable costumes. Costume variety is at an all-time high in this game, not even counting Virgil's campaign, effectively doubling every positive I've had for the game up to now. But the cosmetics aren't the thing elevating this game above its successes, it's their utility. As you may remember, the pursuit of S-ranks is part of the culture in DMC, and if you tackle the infamous must-die difficulties in most of these games, you will gain access to something called a super costume. They vary in function, but usually, they will allow you to have an infinite devil trigger gauge, a fitting reward for tackling the game's biggest challenge. However, starting with DMC4, if you use a super costume while tackling a mission, your final rank will be significantly lessened, effectively making it impossible for you to get an S rank in the mission where you use it. Unlike with the consumable items in these games, the costumes were meant to be earned, to be a reward for the skill you've shown, and serve as another tool in your repertoire to speed up the process of S-ranking every mission on every difficulty. Unlike 4 and 5, DMC3 would not only omit the penalty of using its super costume, but would also give different levels of super costumes for experimentation. The first one would obviously keep your DT gauge at full, unless you used it for the 2 unique styles that function by consuming it, or if you used DT Explosion. Also, this first costume wouldn't heal you when DT was active. But then, to one-up this reward, which you'd normally get for beating very hard difficulty, beating DMD would grant you another super costume that not only had truly infinite DT, but would also heal you, effectively making you indestructible. Using this costume wouldn't guarantee you the S rank in a mission though. It would simply speed up the process, making it feel like an actual reward, unlike with DMC 4 and 5, which not only had the utility of the lesser DMC 3 super costume, but also allowed their costumes to be purchasable DLC for people who didn't want to play the game. If it wasn't obvious, I'm against both the DLC implementation as well as the restraints put onto the costumes, and this is coming from someone who platinumed every game in the franchise, some of them even multiple times. This final unlockable is the ultimate emblem of your accomplishments that would allow you unparalleled creativity in combat even if you're playing on a console, and in turn had no access to outlandish mods that allowed the community to break this game apart. DMC3 as a whole felt like it really implemented every bit of its content in a deliberate way and allowed everyone to bask in its glory once they put in the effort, to the point where even the things the modern DMC community would see as limitations still feel like a positive rather than a hindrance here. In 3, you only have access to a single style, 2 devil arms, and 2 firearms at a time, which some people have labeled as too restrictive, in the wake of the subsequent games allowing for style switching on the fly, alongside giving you access to significantly more weapons at once. But again, in the context of DMC3, this game is fully built around these limitations and genuinely thrives amid them. The prospect of challenge here would be ruined if you tried playing the game with all these tools being readily available, even more so than through the use of a super costume, because the game's style meter and enemy behavior relies on you being creative within the restrictions of 1 style, 2 devil arms, and 2 firearms. This makes it harder to be stylish, but also feels infinitely more rewarding when you pull it off. Someone may be fully proficient in using Rebellion or Beowulf during their 7000th replay of the game, so switching your loadout to something like Nevin and Cerberus could be more than enough to see this game in a brand new light. So again, even the things that feel like limitations here have genuine value to me. And mind you, my favorite game in the franchise is DMC 5, not 3. Which should tell you just how much substance is present in this game even this many years after its launch. I've beaten DMC3 more times than I can count, across different versions and different systems, and every time I return to it, I find something new to admire, or a new challenge that would reignite my interest in the campaign. Because of that, I've purposefully left out things like the OST, the deeper symbolism of the story, the fact that Virgil is literally the greatest final boss in gaming, and many other topics out of this video, so I could cover them in a proper retrospective down the line, despite dozens of content creators having done the same long before me. There's a reason why I put this series right next to Yakuza whenever I discuss my biggest motivations for the creative endeavors on this channel, and that type of passion is exhibited all throughout the DMC community, from fan artists to cosplayers, speedrunners, musicians, and obviously fellow content creators. But even when we remove any emotional ties from this game, the essence of Devil May Cry 3 specifically feels as seamless today as it did in 2005. So do me a favor and play it if you haven't already. Or if you have, maybe go for another S-Rank replay to celebrate its birthday. Either way, that's all I had to say on the topic for the time. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again really soon. So, until next time, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Cheers!